February 6, 1972, around 3:40 p.m. at the In-N-Out Burger Pomona dragstrip, then known as Pomona Raceway, in California, the sun beats down on a packed grandstand as the final rounds of pro stock eliminations roar to life at the NHRA Winter Nationals. The air is thick with burnt rubber and high-octane fuel, and the crowd is electric after a weekend of surprises. NHRA officials believed their new 1972 rule change would restore balance to the class. After big block Chrysler Hemis dominated 1970 and 1971, they introduced a factored weight break. Small block wedge engines now ran at a favorable 6.75 pounds per cubic inch, while big blocks faced 7.25 pounds per cubic inch or more. Compact bodies like the Chevrolet Vega were fully eligible, all in an effort to encourage variety and keep pro stock exciting. But this well-meaning tweak turned into NHRA's big mistake. Staging for the final round is Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins in his unassuming orange 1972 Chevy Vega, nicknamed Grumpy's Toy. Under the stock-appearing body hides the class's first full-tube chassis, from the firewall back, and a destroked 331 cubic inch small-block Chevy pumping out serious power on a lightweight package around 2,300 pounds. Despite qualifying a conservative 17th with a 9.90 ET due to last-minute tuning, Jenkins has sliced through the field on race day, clicking off low 9.60-second passes and upsetting Hemi-powered favorites round after round. In the final, he faces off against a big block contender, launches hard, and storms to victory, shocking the drag racing world in the Vega's debut outing. This one wasn't just a trophy, it proved NHRA's rule had accidentally created a monster, kicking off a revolution in pro stock that would see small block compacts dominate and force endless rule revisions for years to come. Mid-morning on March 8, 1970, around 11:15 a.m. at Pomona Raceway in California, the NHRA Winter Nationals are in full swing, and the brand-new Pro Stock Eliminator is about to make its historic debut. A packed field of 32 factory-fresh American muscle cars lines the staging lanes: big block Camaros, Boss 429 Mustangs, Hemi-powered Plymouth Barracudas and Dodge Challengers, and more. The crowd buzzes with excitement. This new professional class promises heads-up racing with cars that look just like what fans could buy at their local dealership. No handicaps, no indexes, just pure door-to-door battles between Detroit's finest. NHRA created Pro Stock to fill a gap. Super Stock and modified production classes had grown complex with handicaps and indexes, while Top Fuel and Funny Car were becoming exotic tube chassis machines far removed from the street. Fans and manufacturers wanted a class showcasing real production-based hot rods in raw, unbracketed competition. The rules were deliberately straightforward. Cars had to be 1968 or newer North American production models, powered by factory-available gasoline V8 engines. Bodies, frames, and interiors remained mostly stock: steel panels, stock wheelbase, stock-appearing suspension. No major chassis alterations beyond basic safety equipment. Most importantly, every car ran on a flat weight brake of 7 pounds per cubic inch, with a 2,700 pound minimum. A 426 cubic inch engine meant at least 2,982 pounds of total vehicle weight. The inaugural event exceeded all expectations. Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins, already a respected match racer and engine builder from Pennsylvania, stole the show in his black 1968 big block Camaro. He qualified number 1, ran the class's first 9-second pass, a stunning 9.98 at 138.46 miles per hour, and went on to win the entire event. A few weeks later at the Gator Nationals in Florida, Jenkins repeated the feat, cementing Pro Stock as an instant hit. Fans loved seeing recognizable street machines battle it out, and manufacturers jumped in with contingency money and factory support. Ford-backed Dino Don Nicholson in his Boss 429 Maverick, Chevrolet supported teams like Dick Landy, and Chrysler poured resources into Ronnie Sox and Buddy Martin Sox and Martin team running Hemi, Kudos. For the rest of 1970, competition remained fairly balanced. Jenkins, Sox, Nicholson, and others traded wins. Mopar cars took several events, but Chevy and Ford stayed close. Attendance soared. Pro Stock quickly became the most popular door slammer class, drawing bigger crowds than many expected. Magazines like Hot Rod and Car Craft ran cover stories, calling it the class that saved door slammer racing. But cracks appeared in 1971. Chrysler's engineering superiority with the 426 elephant head Hemi began to shine through. The staggered valve heads flowed exceptionally well, and factory support gave Sox and Martin, Don Carlton, and other Mopar teams a tuning edge. Ronnie Sox, already legendary for his flawless 4-speed shifting, became nearly unbeatable. Sox and Martin won 6 of the 8 national events in 1971, with other Hemi cars taking most of the rest. Only Dino Don Nicholson interrupted the streak with a Ford victory. Jenkins, now campaigning a small-block Camaro to experiment with lighter combinations, struggled to match the Hemi's power under the flat-weight brake. The numbers told the story. In 1970 and 1971 combined, Chrysler Hemi-powered cars won 12 of 15 national events. Sox alone claimed 9 victories across those 2 years. The class that was supposed to showcase variety had quietly turned into a Mopar showcase. Chevrolet and Ford teams grew frustrated. Factory support waned as wins became scarce. Fans still showed up, but many complained the racing was becoming predictable. Behind the scenes, NHRA officials grew concerned. Pro Stock's original mission, representing all American manufacturers in close competition, was slipping away. Chevrolet fans, who made up a massive portion of the drag racing audience, felt particularly alienated. NHRA faced a dilemma. They couldn't let the class become a one-make domination, or risk losing manufacturer involvement and spectator interest long-term. Yet they didn't want to alienate Chrysler, whose teams had legitimately exploited the rules better than anyone. Discussions intensified throughout late 1971. Officials studied data from every national event, elapsed times, 60-foot times, trap speeds, and weight-to-power ratios. They consulted top racers and builders, including Jenkins, Nicholson, and Sox himself. The solution they settled on was a factored weight brake system for 1972. Small block wedge engines, like Chevrolet's ubiquitous 353-27, would run at a lighter 6.75 pounds per cubic inch. Staggered valve heads like the Hemi were penalized at 7.25 pounds per cubic inch, adding roughly 100 to 150 pounds to a typical 426 setup. Compact bodies with wheelbases under 100 inches, such as the new Chevrolet Vega or Ford Pinto, were fully legalized as long as they maintained stock appearance and dimensions. The goal was clear: encourage smaller displacement engines and lighter cars, draw Chevrolet and Ford back into contention, and restore manufacturer parity. On paper, it seemed logical, a modest adjustment to prevent monopoly while keeping the class production-based. NHRA announced the changes in late 1971, giving teams the off-season to prepare. Most racers welcomed the intent. Jenkins, ever the forward thinker, immediately began sketching plans for a lightweight combination. No one in the sanctioning body or the pits fully grasped what was coming. They had no idea their well-meaning fix, this big mistake, was about to hand the most innovative minds in drag racing a blueprint for an unstoppable new breed of pro stock machine. The monster awakens. Bill Jenkins builds the unstoppable Vega. Late afternoon on February 6, 1972, around 5:30 p.m. at Pomona Raceway, the sun dips low over the San Gabriel Mountains as Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins pulls into the winner's circle, his orange 1972 Chevrolet Vega still ticking from the final round burnout. The crowd roars louder than the exhaust as Jenkins, ever the stoic Pennsylvania engine builder, accepts the trophy for his stunning pro stock victory at the NHRA Winter Nationals. Qualifying a conservative 17th with a safe 9.90 second pass due to last-minute camshaft and clutch tuning, Jenkins had turned up the wick on race day, reeling off consistent low 9.60-second elapsed times at over 140 miles per hour to upset a 32-car field stacked with factory-backed Hemi Mopars. This wasn't a fluke, it was the explosive debut of a monster born directly from NHRA's big mistake with the 1972 rule changes. No racer exploited the new factored weight brakes better than Bill Jenkins, a man already respected as one of drag racing's sharpest minds. After winning the very first pro stock events in 1970 with his big block Camaro, Jenkins had watched helplessly as Ronnie Sox and the Chrysler Hemi dominated 1971, sweeping nearly every national event under the old flat 7 pounds per cubic inch system. When NHRA announced the shift for 1972, small block wedge engines at a favorable 6.75 pounds per cubic inch, staggered valve big blocks penalized at 7.25, and compact bodies like the Vega fully eligible, Jenkins immediately recognized the opportunity. Back in his Malvern, Pennsylvania shop during the winter of 1971 to 1972, Jenkins and his small crew set to work transforming a production Vega into Grumpy's toy, the car that would redefine pro stock. The foundation was a destroked 331 cubic inch small block Chevrolet V8, bored from a 327 block with a shorter crankshaft to keep displacement under the optimal weight break while allowing sky-high RPM. Jenkins hand-assembled the engine himself, using his signature open-chamber cylinder heads, high-compression pistons, and a meticulously blueprinted bottom end designed to live at 9,000+ RPM on gasoline. Power estimates hovered around 550 to 600 horsepower, impressive but not overwhelming compared to the Hemis, until you factored in the weight. The real magic was the chassis and bodywork. Jenkins built the class's first partial tube chassis, running from the firewall rearward while retaining the stock front subframe to pass tech inspection. This dramatically improved rigidity, reduced flex, and allowed precise suspension tuning for maximum traction. The Vega's compact 97-inch wheelbase and sleek, aerodynamic shape already offered advantages over longer muscle cars, but Jenkins pushed further with legal weight reduction techniques. Body panels were carefully thinned. Some sources describe selective acid dipping, though Jenkins always maintained he stayed within rules. Interior stripped to essentials, and lightweight components sourced wherever possible. Race-ready, the car tipped scales around 2,300 pounds, hundreds less than typical Hemi, Cudas now burdened by the penalty weight. Suspension was another Jenkins masterpiece. Custom valved shocks, optimized geometry for the Vega's rear leaf springs, and tire stagger that maximized the 60-foot times. Clutch and transmission tuning were obsessive. Jenkins famously used a stock BorgWarner Super T10 4-speed with his own gear ratios and a long-style slider clutch, shifting himself with surgical precision. That season alone, he recorded over 250 consecutive passes without missing a gear, an astonishing feat in an era of brutal clutch dumps and high RPM shifts. The Pomona win was just the opening act. As the 1972 season unfolded with its 8 national events, Jenkins and the Vega went on an absolute tear. He won the Gator Nationals in March, the Spring Nationals in April, the Summer Nationals in July, the popular Hot Rodding Championships, and more, 6 victories total, often by huge margins. At Indianapolis for the U.S. Nationals in September, Jenkins again dominated, sealing the NHRA Pro Stock World Championship with room to spare. His consistency was unmatched. The Vega's superior launch, regularly cutting 1.40 to 1.45 second 60-foot times, gave it hole shots that the heavier Hemis couldn't overcome, even with their torque advantage downtrack. Earnings reflected the dominance. Jenkins reportedly took home around $250,000 in winnings and contingency money that year, making him one of the highest-paid drivers in America at the time. Magazines dubbed him the king of pro stock, and fans flocked to see the little orange Vega humiliate the big block giants. Competitors scrambled. Ford teams like Hubert Platt and Gap and Roush quickly fielded small block Pintos to chase the formula, while Chevrolet poured more support behind Jenkins. Chrysler teams protested loudly, but the rules were the rules, and Jenkins' builds always passed scrutiny. This monster didn't just win, it changed the mindset of every pro stock racer. Suddenly, power to weight became the holy grail, engineering creativity trumped factory muscle, and the class entered its wildest, most innovative phase. NHRA's attempt at parity had accidentally unleashed a revolution, and Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins was the man holding the reins. The Backlash, rule changes, and lasting legacy. Early evening on September 4, 1972, around 6:45 p.m. at Indianapolis Raceway Park, the sky over the famed dragstrip turns orange as the final pro stock runoff concludes at the U.S. Nationals, the biggest event on the NHRA calendar. Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins powers his orange 1972 Chevrolet Vega across the finish line first once again, securing his 6th national event victory of the season and mathematically clinching the 1972 NHRA Pro Stock World Championship. The grandstands erupt, but in the pits, reactions are mixed. Cheers from Chevy fans mingle with frustrated murmurs from the Chrysler camp. Jenkins' utter dominance has become undeniable, and the monster unleashed by NHRA's big mistake is now fully grown. Throughout the 8-event 1972 season, Jenkins and his lightweight Vega had rewritten the record books. Starting with the shocking upset at the Winter Nationals in February, he marched through the Gator Nationals, Spring Nationals, Summer Nationals, popular Hot Rodding Championships, and Fall Nationals before sealing the deal at Indy. Consistency was his weapon. Low, 9.60-second elapsed times, 140-plus mph traps, and 60-foot times in the 1.40s that left heavier Hemi cars playing catch-up from the first inch. The once mighty Chrysler teams, led by legends like Ronnie Sox and Buddy Martin in their Sox and Martin Plymouths, managed only scattered wins as the 7.25 pounds per cubic inch penalty added crucial weight they couldn't fully overcome. The backlash began almost immediately after Pomona and grew louder with every Jenkins victory. Mopar racers and officials cried foul, arguing that the Vega and emerging Ford Pintos were stretching the stock in pro stock far beyond its original intent. Hidden partial tube chassis, extreme weight reduction methods, and compact bodies with superior aerodynamics turned the class into silhouette racing rather than factory hot rod battles. Protests flooded NHRA tech stations at every event. Competitors demanded deeper inspections of body panels, chassis welds, and engine blueprints. While Jenkins cars always passed under the existing 1972 rules, the complaints highlighted a growing divide. Traditionalists felt the spirit of pro stock was being lost. Chrysler, already reeling from reduced factory support as General Motors and Ford ramped up involvement, lobbied hard behind the scenes. Team owners pointed out that the class was drifting away from representing production cars. Fans came to see Camaros, Cudas, and Mustangs, not subcompacts with radical modifications. Media coverage amplified the controversy. Magazines like Hot Rod and Carcraft ran features debating whether pro stock was still pro stock or had become an unlimited engineering class in disguise. Attendance remained strong. The racing was closer and more exciting than the Hemi monopoly years, but NHRA officials knew they had a problem. The first major response came swiftly for the 1973 season. NHRA banned the acid dipping process used to chemically thin body panels, a technique several top teams, including Jenkins, had refined to shave critical pounds while staying technically legal. Minimum weights were increased for certain configurations, particularly short wheelbase compacts, to reduce the whole shot advantage. Chassis rules were clarified and tightened, prohibiting further expansion of tube frame sections. These changes forced teams to add ballast and rethink setups, slowing the small block compact onslaught slightly and giving big block entries a brief reprieve. But the evolution didn't stop. By 1974, NHRA introduced additional refinements, stricter body templates, engine setback limits, and revised weight breaks that crept upward across the board. The goal was to slow the cars and restore some resemblance to production vehicles. Over the next several years, the rulebook became a constant work in progress. Wheelbase minimums rose, aerodynamic aids were restricted, and fuel systems faced new scrutiny. The wild compact era gradually faded as teams migrated toward midsize bodies with ever more sophisticated tube chassis hidden beneath fiberglass replicas. The ripple effects reshaped pro stock entirely. What began as a class for near-stock muscle cars evolved into today's highly specialized category: full tube frame chassis, 500 cubic inch naturally aspirated mountain motors, electronic fuel injection, introduced in 2016, and speeds exceeding 210 miles per hour in the 6.50-second range. The engineering arms race sparked by the 1972 rule change laid the foundation for this modern era, where data acquisition, computational fluid dynamics, and precision manufacturing dominate. Bill Jenkins adapted masterfully to every revision. He continued campaigning updated Vegas through 1974 and beyond, remained a top contender into the late 1970s, and transitioned into one of the most successful engine builders in the sport. His Malvern shop produced championship power plants for drivers across multiple classes, and his data-driven philosophy influenced generations. When Jenkins retired from driving, he stayed involved as a tuner and mentor, earning universal respect as the undisputed godfather of pro stock. The legacy of NHRA's accidental monster endures in restored examples of the original 1972 Vega, which still appear at historic events, cackles, and museums. They serve as tangible reminders of a pivotal moment when one rule tweak, meant to fix imbalance, ignited an era of unprecedented innovation and excitement. NHRA learned that in drag racing, creativity often outpaces regulation, and attempts to constrain the field can instead produce its greatest leaps forward. Ultimately, the 1972 big mistake wasn't a failure. It was the catalyst that propelled pro stock from a promising new class into one of motorsport's most technically fascinating disciplines. Mid-morning on March 2, 2012, around 10 a.m. in Malvern, Pennsylvania, the drag racing world receives somber news as Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins, the architect behind pro stock's most revolutionary era, passes away at age 81 after a long illness. Tributes pour in from across the sport, honoring the man whose genius turned NHRA's big mistake into one of the greatest chapters in heads-up racing history. Looking back 4 decades to that fateful 1972 season, it's clear the factored weight break, intended to end Chrysler Hemi dominance and restore variety, was a classic case of unintended consequences. NHRA officials wanted parity after Ronnie Sox and the Mopar teams swept most events in 1970 and 1971. By giving small block wedges a favorable 6.75 pounds per cubic inch and allowing lightweight compact bodies like the Chevrolet Vega, they believed they were leveling the field. Instead, they handed innovators like Jenkins the perfect formula: high-revving destroked engines, extreme weight savings, and chassis advancements that produced unbeatable launch performance. The result was a monster that dominated immediately and reshaped pro stock forever. Jenkins' 1972 Vega didn't just win races, it won 6 of 8 nationals, secured the championship, and forced competitors to abandon big-block muscle cars in favor of purpose-built compacts. The class evolved from factory hot rods into an engineering showcase, with tube chassis, aerodynamic tweaks, and relentless optimization becoming the norm. NHRA spent years playing catch-up, banning acid dipping in 1973, adjusting minimum weights, tightening body rules, and eventually embracing the full-tube frame, mountain motor formula we see today with 500 cubic inch naturally aspirated engines and electronic fuel injection. That accidental rule change sparked what many call the golden era of pro stock, the wild 1970s and early 1980s when creativity flourished amid constant rule battles. It attracted huge crowds, elevated drivers to superstar status, and pushed technological boundaries that influenced all forms of motorsport. Without NHRA's big mistake, we might never have seen the likes of Jenkins Vegas, the Gap and Roush 4-speed Pintos, or the iconic battles that defined the decade. Jenkins himself remained a fixture in the sport long after retiring from driving in the late 1970s. He continued building championship-winning engines, mentoring young racers, and earning universal respect as the godfather of pro stock. His meticulous data-driven approach, logging every pass, tuning with precision, and never missing a shift, set the standard for professionalism. Even as the class changed beyond recognition, his 1972 breakthrough is still celebrated at historic events, where restored versions of Grumpy's Toy fire up to the delight of fans who remember when one rule tweak turned an unassuming Vega into an unstoppable legend. NHRA learned a valuable lesson. In a sport fueled by innovation and speed, attempts to constrain often ignite the next revolution. The 1972 weight break wasn't a failure. It was a catalyst that made pro stock faster, more competitive, and ultimately more enduring. Today, as modern pro stockers rocket down the quarter mile in the high 6-second range at over 210 miles per hour, they carry the DNA of that accidental monster born from a simple rulebook adjustment. So the next time you watch a pro stock final and marvel at the engineering marvels lining up, remember February 6, 1972, at Pomona, when NHRA made a big mistake that accidentally created one of drag racing's greatest legends. What do you think was NHRA's biggest rule mistake of all time? Was it the 1972 weight break, or something else from another era? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Which controversial rule or banned car should we cover next? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next untold story from the world of drag racing.